Of all the things that I will say today, the most important is on the screen. And it's good to see all of you, really. It's especially good to see Janice Dana. Glad you're here. Oh, wait. What happened? So no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, you are celebrated here. And thanks to Corbin and Tim and John for doing the work back there that makes those of you who are watching online able to join. And one other announcement I would make is that this Wednesday evening, let me put this up here, at the Jung Center, there will be an event, a fundraising event featuring Father Richard Rohr. Now, that event is sold out. However, if you want to attend online, those tickets are still available. And I understand that this is the most successful fundraising event that the Jung Center has ever had. And it's because Rohr is going to be here. So if you want to attend that, you're welcome. To do that. So we begin in silence. Our silence reflects our intention, not only to be present, but to re-acknowledge that we live in the heart of sacred mystery, and that sacred mystery seeks to find expression through who we are and how we live. So let's be silent. And I use these words that I adapted from a medieval book of hours that comes from the early 16th century. May grace be in our heads and in our thinking. Grace be in our eyes and in our seeing. Grace be in our ears and in our hearing. May grace be in my mouth and in my speaking. May grace be in our hearts and in our understanding. And may grace be at our ends and at our departing. And may the power of new life give us the courage to walk the path of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. So last week, which was the first part of a two-part presentation, I left you hanging. I said that we were in a Calvary moment in this culture. And I didn't know last Sunday that would be even more intense by today. The word Calvary is a Latin word that means skull. And it comes from the application of the Latin word to the place outside the walls of the city of Jerusalem where people were crucified for crimes against the state. By the way, I took this picture of a crucifix on a pilgrimage tour in Italy, and I wonder if you noticed anything strange about it. I guess you have to be somebody who looks at a lot of crucifixes to know. But I saw it and I was immediately struck by its oddity. And the priest of this particular church happened to be there, and I asked him about the crucifix, and he gave me a very curt response. He just said, "Artist discretion." You will notice that the head of the body hanging on the cross hangs to the right instead of to the left. Yeah, that's right. It hangs to the left instead of the right, which is the way it is on 99.98% of every crucifix you've ever seen. So I thought that was kind of unusual. The surest thing we know about Jesus is that he was executed. And he was executed because he was a threat to both the political and the religious establishment. Had he been guilty of a religious crime, he would have been stoned to death, because that's what the Jewish law commanded. But because he was guilty of a crime against the state, he was crucified. And it would be centuries before the perverse notion that God sent Jesus to die for the sins of people would develop. That did not develop until centuries, sometime in the 13th, 14th century. And when you really think about it, that is a form of divine child abuse. So what do I mean by Calvary moment? Calvary was the time when those relatively few people who had been transformed by their association with Jesus saw the man that they loved and that they followed, and the hopes that he had stirred in them die. It was a time of utter hopelessness and despair. And contrary to what many people have come to believe, the transformative experience called resurrection didn't develop for some years after the execution of Jesus. The stories that we have about the birth of Jesus and about the death of Jesus are parables. And the parable created about the resurrection and the creeds of the Christian faith that many people affirm say that on the third day Jesus rose from the dead. Now the creeds also affirm a lot of other pre-Copernican things that people say they believe when they are in church. But rationally they don't believe. But some people go to the mat about this. The number 3 is a metaphor. It means transition. And you all are familiar with it. There are the 3 blind mice. There are the 3 little pigs. There is Goldilocks and the 3 bears. And there is a pastor, a minister, and a pastor, priest, and a ribeye walked into a bar. One of my favorite cartoons. So when we get to the end of the Jesus narrative, I'll go into more detail, more fully, about the last week and the resurrection experience, or what we call resurrection. But I just ask you to trust me right now when I say that a literal reading of the story of resurrection is a major misunderstanding of that story. So right now, the United States is on a political path that has led, depending on whose version of history you pay attention to and trust, a one-man authoritarian rule. And what little commentary I exposed myself to this past week says that whether what has happened this past week is the end of a dark chapter in American history, or the beginning of a darker chapter in American history, is yet to be determined. But we are in that liminal space. Liminal means threshold. It's between when you go from one place and have not yet entered another. So I mentioned last week that our country is an addicted society, and there are many definitions of addiction. One is that an addiction is any self-destructive behavior that a person does not seem to be able or willing to stop or control, and which, if persisted, will result in destruction or death of that person who is caught up in the addiction. Now, I know you don't have any addictions, but I will tell you about the people who do. There are 2 types of addictions. A person can have an ingestive addiction. That is, when you're addicted to things like alcohol or coffee, nicotine, prescription or non-prescription drugs, anything taken into the body. They are ingested. And then there is the process addiction. And this is where somebody is caught up in a behavior like, I know this will sound so foreign to you, like scrolling on their phone, or texting, or pornography, or gambling, or shopping, anything that distracts them and derails them from purposeful living. Now, it's common for addicts to deny that they have an addiction, even when they know that they do. We humans are very complicated animals. Now, last week when I said that stopping things like the mass shooting that took place in the church in Minneapolis, I said our situation is hopeless. And to underscore that, just this week, we had the assassination of a person, husband, father of two, who was an animator and influencer of the political right. Now, our current leadership has blamed this on the left, radical left. And I just want to put that in perspective. Since 2016, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, data shows that there have been 224 fatalities caused by right-wing extremist groups. That's since 2014. Since 2014, there have been 3 deaths caused by left-wing extremist groups. So the rhetoric in places of leadership used about extremist acts can either help or hinder how we move forward in this time. I was trying to resume a podcast I was listening to in my car, and I inadvertently hit one of the satellite radio station buttons to get there. And I don't know what your experience is, if you ever have this experience in your car, but if I hit a satellite news-related button, I always, 90% of the time, get a commercial. I'm serious. I don't know. I asked my granddaughter yesterday, who's a math genius, about that, and she just, I don't know. So that. But what I heard just briefly on this news report, that there were already people seeking the revenge for the death of Charlie Kirk. Now, just 2 weeks ago, we had Ann Johnson stand right here, state representative, and say that she herself has now have to hire protection because of death threats made against her. That's in our state. However, since we live in a country where there are 100 guns for every person in the population, yeah, our future is bleak. One of the things our culture is addicted to is violence. We are convinced of the effectiveness of what we call redemptive violence. So someone asked me during this past week about last week's teaching, and they said to me, well, if something like the mass shooting in Minneapolis is hopeless, what's the solution? And my answer is simple. It will take a miracle. And that's what today's teaching about. Last week I talked about breathing underwater. Today I want to talk about walking on water. Last week I said that the block of material from the Jesus narrative that I'm basing my teaching on says in summary that Jesus went about proclaiming the good news of the power of true community, and these were those who made up that motley crew that supported and followed him. What we didn't talk about was the block of material that immediately follows that, which says, in essence, and this is how he went about doing those things. He did it by healing people of all sorts of ailments and problems. So here's the passage. that is, Jesus' fame spread throughout the region of Galilee, and people brought the sick on stretchers to wherever they heard he was staying. And whenever he came to a town or village, they would lay down the sick in the marketplace. And they brought him those who were suffering many kinds of diseases and torments, and demoniacs and epileptics and paralytics, and he healed them. So over the years, I have experienced, either by what people have said directly to me or their behavior, that they find it difficult to find a box into which they can put me. I am way too progressive to be Christian. And I'm way too Christian to be progressive. So sometimes in trying to figure out what to do with me, people will ask questions. And usually these questions are not what I call open, honest questions. An open question doesn't push you into a corner, and an honest question doesn't predetermine how you should answer the question. So the questions I get that are not open, honest questions are questions like these. Do you believe in God? Do you believe in prayer? Do you believe God answers prayer? Do you believe in the resurrection? And the answer to that is no, I believe in resurrection, but I don't use the article the in front of it. And then the question, do you believe in miracles? Now, what that person means who's asking that question is, do you believe that Jesus did the miracles that are referred to in the New Testament? Well, let's start here. There are 5 things that people who claim to be fundamentalist Christians believe in. These are a belief in the literal nature and infallibility of the Bible. They believe in the literal virgin birth of Jesus. They believe that Jesus died for their sins, or for the atonement. The word atonement means at one with. They believe in the literal physical resurrection of Jesus. And they believe in the historical reality, literal nature of miracles. Those are the 5 things. And if you don't believe those 5 things, according to people who do believe those 5 things, you're not really a Christian. Now, if I believed in the first one, the literal nature of the Bible, I would conclude that Jesus was a peaceful, radical, nonviolent revolutionary who wasn't American and never spoke English, who hung around lepers, hookers, and crooks, who never sought tax cuts for rich Nazarenes, was anti-wealth, anti-death penalty, anti-public prayer. He never asked lepers for copay. He never called poor people lazy. He was never even slightly anti-gay, never mentioned abortion. He supported paying taxes. He was a long-haired, community organizing, authority questioning, anti-slut shaming, brown-skinned, Palestinian, unarmed, homeless Jew. That's what's in the Bible. And, oh, by the way, I stole those words from John Fugelsang. He's a comedian I just love. He's got a book called The Separation of Church and Hate, which is really funny to read. So, back up to 1963 or 4, I had just been invited to join the faculty of the graduate school seminary where I had gone to school. And it was what I had trained for. It is what I had looked forward to. It was what I wanted to do. It's where I saw that I was going to spend the rest of my career. And summer before the fall semester, I went away to a conference. I don't remember where it was. I think it was in New Mexico. And I don't remember it was a biblical scholarship conference, literary conference. And the drawing card for me in going was that there was this German biblical New Testament scholar. German theologians were the big thing in my seminary training. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Emil Brunner, Karl Barth, Paul Tillich, all those people. I don't remember the name of this guy, but I remember that he was really good at what he did in New Testament studies. And one day after one of his lectures, he had a Q&A period. And I was ready. I was so smart in those days. You would have been impressed. So at the end of his lecture, I said, and he recognized me, and he was standing over the side of his podium like this, you know. And I said, "Sir, if you're so freaking smart," I did not say that, but that's what seeped out in my question. I said, if I had been alive during the time of Jesus, would I have seen as miracles the miracles that are reported in the New Testament? And his answer was no. Not if you don't see them now. So I crawled out under the door. Perhaps Einstein's most famous quote, certainly it's one that's used a lot, is the one he said, "There are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle, and the other is though everything is a miracle." The reason I am attracted to Einstein is not because of this. It's because of what his desk looked like. So I keep my desk like that in hopes. So I used to be foolish enough to try to respond to fundamentalist questions. And one of my responses was, well, if you believe that the Jesus miracles were literally true, do you believe they were true also for other spiritual teachers? Now, since fundamentalists think that Christianity is the only real religion, that answer was not effective. But Muslims, since they embrace Moses as a prophet, embrace all the Moses cycle of miracles, splitting the sea, getting water out of a rock, his rods turned into a snake, and all of that. They believe that also when Jesus was an infant, he said something to protect his mother Mary from disaster. They believe that when Jesus was an infant, he took clay and made a bird and it flew away. They believe that Muhammad could go physically from one place to the other through the air like that. But the big miracle in Islam is the Quran. That's why they get so upset when you do something either to the image of the prophet or to the Quran, because the Quran is a direct, literal, physical gift from God to the prophet. That's pretty cool. Buddha could emit fire from his fingers. He could manifest as 1,000 Buddhas all over the world at one time to teach the Dharma. He could float in the sky. And when he was a child, everywhere he walked, flowers sprung up in the steps that he took. Now, if the miracles of Jesus are literally true, can those be true as well? Now, there is a story in Matthew, Mark, and marginally in John about Jesus walking on water. Now, if you read the story as a news story, it's bizarre. Jesus was not a first century David Copperfield. So it was doing some sort of cosmic sleight of hand. I repeat what I said last week. The gospel narratives are a parabolic telling of the message and meaning of Jesus' life from the time he left John the Baptist, and because of his teaching in deed and word about a new world order, God himself executed, and that his death was not the end of the story. You memorize that, you've got the Gospels in summary. So the people who assemble what we call the Gospels did not go around with GoPros attached to their foreheads. They were not making a documentary for National Geographic. They were storytellers. And they created stories to tell a much deeper truth than, hey, look what our guy can do. And what the story of Jesus walking on water is saying, it's a profound parable, is that the storms of life don't have to drown us. That there's something that can keep us afloat. As one interpreter said, the story does not carry the headline, "Local Rabbi Invents New Swimming Technique." The story is a parable, and it has deep meaning. We don't have to be swallowed up by the turmoil, either inner or outer, that seeks to overwhelm us. So when we shrink a story down like this to, did it literally happen? We have reduced it to its least meaningful, least useful size. We have turned poetry into paperwork. We have turned it into something about power and winning, rather than about love, turning despair into courage, and strangers into friends. Now, after I wrote what you're about to hear, I looked at it and I said, man, that sounds arrogant. And I don't mean it that way. But it's the truth for me. I can safely say that I have spent decades. I don't want to tell you how many because that makes me sound old. But I have spent decades reading about and studying what Carl Jung meant when he wrote that the resolution of one's difficulty in life, and that one can be an individual or a collective, resided in finding a religious or spiritual solution to life's dilemma. The kind of thing that would drive a person to see a person like Carl Jung. Carl Jung said, and a therapist can't say this at the first 2 visits that we have with a client, but what heals somebody in the therapeutic relationship is not technique and knowledge, it's love. It's the love that exists between the two people. So one of the co-founders of AA, now this is a long time ago, it's in the late 20s, early 30s, went to Zurich to consult with Jung. He had been in and out of hospitals trying to deal with his addiction to alcohol, and nothing had worked. And it was difficult to get to go see Carl Jung, but he made it. And the man told Jung his story, which is a story, as I said, of one failed attempt after another to beat his addiction. And Jung listened to him. And then he said to him, I can't help you. Your situation is hopeless. Now, I don't know how you would feel if your therapist said that to you. And it's not reported what the man's initial reaction was. I can imagine, if I try to put myself in his place, that after all he had done and been through, to get there, to hear that, was a major blow. And that he maybe sat there for a while, stunned and not knowing what to do next. And finally, he said to Carl Jung, then what am I to do? And Jung's response was very simple. He said, You might try religion. That man came back to the United States, and he buddied up with a guy named Bill Wilson. This man's name was Dr. Robert Holbrook Smith, and in AA circles, he's simply called Dr. Bob. And we may have to do without slides the rest of the time. My power thing is gone. So imagine good slides. So Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson founded AA. And the first 3 steps of AA are, we admitted that we were powerless or hopeless. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And we made a decision to devote ourselves to walking that path. Corbin, you are going to go to heaven. Let's see if I can get back there. It will happen, or won't. So when you look at what's going on in our country, the situation is indeed hopeless. Can you be patient? Okay. I think we're here. We are. Okay. These are the AA steps that I just did. I had a conversation this week with Dr. Carol Archer. You know her. She was here to talk about her program. Dr. Carol Archer is the originator of a program called Culture Bump, which is used all over the world. It's right now being used in Palestine to help Palestinian people communicate with people who are not Palestinian. And Carol and I are trying to figure, and some others of us are too, and having lunch here is a step in that direction. It's not a major one, but it's a great one, where we can sit down and talk to people who are different. We're working on that. And Carol said during our conversation, we were just lamenting, this is after Kirk's murder, she said, we are living at a level where we do not have the skills to live. We do not have the emotional intelligence to live at the level where technology has gotten us. And by we, she didn't mean the United States, she meant the globe. We as a species are not equipped to live at the level where we're living. We have to admit that. That's the first step. So, like Dr. Bob sitting with you, what are we going to do? Is there a solution? And I think that the answer or answers to that are full of paradox, and they're full of contradiction. So I want to begin to attempt a set of responses to those questions, and I'm using this parable of Jesus by walking on water. Our goal is our being part of the group that accompanied and enabled Jesus and each other to make real community of power and healing. That's our responsibility. It's the power of healing that comes by being in the presence of the sacred, as symbolized in the Christian tradition by Jesus. So actually, in some ways, the question, which I love to ask, it has driven therapists and spiritual directors I've had over the years nuts, that I would end so many sessions by saying, what should I do? And I have to confess that really what I'm asking when I ask that question is, what can I do to feel safe? What can I do to be secure? And the answer, of course, to that is nothing. These "what can I do" questions are kind of in the category of asking how far is blue. They just don't compute. They don't make sense. There's nothing to be done. And people who are busy being usually do certain things. The people that I admire and respect, who are busy being, are people who are open, they are honest, and they are willing to change when they find new light. You know, we humans are very creative. We are very clever in devising ways not to live as who we were designed to be. So let's just start here. Spiritual work is hard. And one of the things that our technology has lured us into believing is that things should be easy. Push a button, there it is. Spiritual work is hard. It's difficult letting go of beliefs that are no longer useful. But Lord, we have a hard time doing that. I love this church and I love our church, but I will say organized religion is not going to be the answer for us as long as we are stuck in pre-Copernican creedal language. We got to move beyond that. And yet, even a progressive place like this is so reluctant to do that. Well, it's always the way we've done things. Might upset somebody. Deconstruction is hard. When I was a child, I was taught, this is easy. All you have to do is believe that Jesus died for your sins, and you're safe. That's it. Go have a nice life. Now, if you agree with the experts of our culture, and I'm including people like Richard Rohr and Jim Finley and the director of the Jung Center and your own teacher here, that ours is an addicted society. Recovering from addiction is hard. And for everybody, it begins with some version of hitting bottom. I don't know if our culture's there yet or not. We'll see. But it begins with an admission that the way I've been doing things isn't working anymore. And there are people who know that, but they keep doing them anyway. Now, there are steps to be taken on the highway to recovery. And we should not anticipate they will all be fun. These stages involve emotional convalescence. They involve unbearable pain, poignant grief, empty days, resistance to consolation, disinterestedness in life, gradually giving way to a new pattern of action and acceptance of the irresistible challenge of life. What I want to say is that the wayless way is a process. It is not a destination. And what we get to choose on the wayless way is which discomfort we want to live with. I want you to leave here feeling good. But really, we have to be honest. Doing what we individually and we as a country need to do to get out of where we are is not going to be easy. It will be uncomfortable. Now, I believe that living at the mystical yet practical level is available to every one of us. It does, however, mean transcending where we are. So we're moving into a time when narrow, tribal, political, religious, racial, economic, educational status, and all the other ways that we've had of categorizing of the other is useless. Racial differences are senseless. When you think of the fact that just a few hundred years ago, we all came from the same place. Now, here's a paradox for you. Change, like recovering from an addiction, takes a long time. And it happens in an instant. After I got licensed to practice psychotherapy, my first paying job beside a very small part-time private practice was I got a contract job working at Baylor, and my patient population were alcoholics and their families for 2 years. That's all I saw. And that was so useful for me, so absolutely useful for me. That's where I learned that recovering from addiction takes a long time and happens like that. Both. And one of the things I was gifted with was that one of the patients gave me a little book, and it's called My Autobiography in 5 Chapters. It's a book that was written by Portia Nelson, I believe that was her name. And I'm going to read you all 5 chapters. It's very brief. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes me forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in this same spot, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. That's recovery in 5 chapters. Life is full of paradox and contradiction. One of the saints who has had a profound influence on my life and living is Thich Nhat Hanh. And it's from him that I got this prayer that I use every morning. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live each moment fully, and to look at all beings with eyes of compassion. So every day, we're called up to wake up to the same old problems. In our marriage, in our family, in our relationship, our jobs in this country, the sickness, the death, pollution, poverty, the political divisions, the gun deaths, all the rest of it, every day. And that's not all. There is the possibility of laughter and beauty and joy in your marriage, in your family, in your relationships, in your job, in this country. The world in which we live, our individual world as well as the nation and the global one, is always a place of holy presence. And that's a miracle. All we have to do is participate in it. Of course, you might have to give something up for that. God is a process, and we're part of that process. And I'm coming more and more to see that this was the healing essence of Jesus' message, and it's what changed the world, where people who embraced and lived that message became different people. And some spiritual teachers call about it reprogramming the system, our operating system. We let go of beliefs and behaviors that are no longer useful or wise. And that can be frightening, that can be confusing, because they're comfortable for us. They've worked for us. I have a friend who is an addiction expert. He's not a recovering alcoholic, but he's an addiction expert. And he said to me one day, you know, on the days when I most think, man, I need to go home and have a drink, is the very day that I will not do that. And when we give up these crutches, we feel vulnerable, we feel lonely, we feel needy. We're like we're going on a road without a map or a flashlight. Like we're on a path nobody's traveled before, which is true and not true. As the Zen saying says, we walk a path no one has trod before, following the guidepost left by others. St. Augustine once said, God is always trying to give us good things, but our hands are too full to receive them. Our hands are full of things to which we are addicted. And of course, it's not just our hands, but it's our hearts and minds. And our attention gets clogged up with things that fill the spaces where grace might flow. And the miracle that Jesus performed with people is that he brought them a message that set them free from the lies the world had told about them. Their world, their small religious political world, said to somebody, you can't participate in the world because you're blind or have a skin condition or because you're physically affected in some way. You can't participate. You can't do that. And Jesus said, hey, I see past what they say limits you to who you really are. And that set them free. He pulled the rug out from under them and in the process gave them another place to stand. That's the essence of miracles. Being seen by the sacred as who we truly are. It's a paradox. In dealing with addiction, we have to do the work of admitting our true circumstances, and then we're gifted with the grace that sets us free. I do not claim to know how this works. I just know that it does. It's worked for me, and I commend it to you. Amazing grace. Amazing grace. My spiritual teacher said to me decades ago, he said, I'm going to give you one principle with which, if you work it and embrace it, will take you home. And that's the principle of equality. He said, don't ever put anybody up. Don't ever put anybody down. Everybody's on the same level. Now, what I mean by this is that everybody here, each, including me, we have to see and be honest about how we participate in the dysfunction of our culture. And we have to develop the courage to head in the direction of the people who scare us. And we have to get to know them. When Jesus said, love our enemies, I think what he was saying was that embracing that we are part of the whole is the only way to grasp the whole picture. No addiction is solved at this level. It's solved here. Our fear comes from the need to control. And folks, we're not in control of anything. I think Hume was right. There is no hope for us until and unless we get back to our spiritual base. Now, I don't know what that is for you. I do know, and I'm trying to be clear, that I'm not talking about a religious belief. We're not going to solve what's happening at the religious level, at least how our current culture understands religion. We have to transcend that. The scourge called Christian nationalism does not know, nor do they embrace the teachings of Jesus. We can. It won't be easy. No authentic spiritual teacher promises that. Buddhism starts with, life is difficult. Jesus said, following me will not be easy. And we are not in an easy place. But miracles happen. Every time someone says, I love you, to someone our culture says is unlovable, that's a miracle. Every time an unhoused person is unable to find a place to live and a way to sustain themselves, that's a miracle. Every time shows up with food when someone is sick or there's been a death, that's a miracle. So when someone asks me, did Jesus really perform miracles? My response is that if you're looking for something magical, you're going to be disappointed. But if you mean the kind of love that keeps breaking through the cracks in this messy world, then yes, absolutely. The better question to ask is, are we willing to join love in that kind of miracle? Might cost you. Might cost us. But folks, not doing so is costing so much more. Amen, and so be it. No matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, remember this, you carry precious cargoes, so watch your step. And I'll see you here next Sunday. Thank you. Thank you.